بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. So last time, just to remind you, what we were doing was we were going through the Quran Toolkit, something that kind of I put together for non-Arab speakers to connect with the Quran, right? And I hope that was inspirational. So what we did was we did an introduction of the Quran. I told you guys why I created the toolkit. We talked about the importance of the Quran, through the Quranic ayat and some ahadith. Then we talked about all of this being divided into really three steps. This whole toolkit is divided into three steps. One is the preparation. The second is astaghfirullah, the learning that you need to do and engagement with the Quran. And today, inshallah, we will talk about the study, the deeper study, and how do you do it. So just to remind you, in preparation, it was all about having sincerity and patience and gratitude. You're not going to understand everything and know everything day one. It's going to take a long time to develop a deeper understanding of the Quran. But in part of the preparation, we also talked about how to develop having the working knowledge of the Sīrah, how Sīrah is going to help you understand and relate to the Quran, knowing about the Jewish history, how that's going to help you understand the Quran, knowing about the Christian history, knowing a little bit about the Hebrew Bible and the New Testament, and those kinds of things, right? So we talked about that. Then we talked about knowing the audience of the Quran. Who is the audience of the Quran? So initial audience is Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and then later, but we often forget this. But the audience is, can be the mushrikun of Makkah. It could be the hypocrites of Medina. It is the Sahaba Karam, right? And sometimes Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks to humankind in general, etc. So we have to keep, whenever we read an ayah, we have to keep the audience in mind. Who is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaking to? Okay. Then we talked about learning the Quran and how to engage with the Quran. So having this constant engagement of the Quran, listening to the Arabic again and again every single day, having the listening to the English translation as much as you can. So, and that will help you pick up on phrasing, on different things Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala uses over and over and over, how sometimes Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says the same thing in different ways. And that meaning obviously will not only help you understand the message of the Quran, but it will also help you understand the personality of the Quran and how Quran speaks. So you will be able to connect the topics that are being discussed later on, for example, with topics that are discussed earlier in the Quran, because Quran is not linear. It's not a linear book, right? So you have to kind of listen and put it all together. You have to understand it as a unit. So things that are talked about in the beginning of in the order of the Quran and the canon might be explained later on. For example, we learn Ihdina Sirat al-Mustaqim, guide us to the Sirat al-Mustaqim. What is Sirat al-Mustaqim? What is that? That is explained throughout the Quran in different ways, in different chunks. So you understand what that actually means. Obviously, it's the straight path. The whole Quran is Siratul Mustaqim at the end of the day. But how do you even know that? How do you even know that? You know that by reading the whole Quran, and then you kind of understand, okay, that's what that is. Okay. Just as an example. So having this constant engagement in the Quran, then I shared with you guys the Safina Society, the YouTube playlist that has the translation by Abdul Halim, who is an Oxford University scholar of the Quran. He translated the Quran. It is currently known as the best English translation of the Quran in the world. Okay, it is excellent. And the whole thing is on audio. And it's available on YouTube, and I shared the link. If anybody needs it, please let me know again. Okay. Then we spent a long time also, the second half of the class last time, we talked about the learning the structure of the Quran. How do you understand? Like, because it seems random. Okay, there are surahs, In the beginning, they're longer. Toward the end, they're shorter. But why that order? Uh, what is a surah? What is an ayah? We talked some of those things, right? How it's broken up into passages, etc. And then we also talked briefly about the Makki and the Madani ayat. Then we talked about what kind of topics are in the Quran, what kind of language the Quran uses, that it's bold, it's full of imagery, it's very vivid, it's very emphatic, there's a lot of rhetorical questions, etc. And then how do you understand that when you are reading the Quran, how do you compartmentalize the themes and the topics being discussed in the Quran? We talked about using Hadith Jibril as your anchor, and all of those 13 buckets, the 5 arkan of Islam, the 6 arkan of Iman, and the 2 arkan of Ihsan. And you bucket everything in those areas. And then you can, in your head, just create subcategories too, or on paper. So the different topics, we talked about all of that. So this was just a quick review of what we did last time. So if you're confused, go ahead and listen to not last week's, but the lecture that we did about 3 weeks ago. So now, while you're doing all of this, how do you have a deeper connection with the Quran beyond just the simple translation and the recitation and understanding the structure? Because that's just level 1, right? How do you get to level 2? Inshallah. So let's start that. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. So before I start this, let me quickly talk about what this toolkit is based upon. I should have started with that. So there is a very, very famous ayah in the Quran which is repeated a couple of times. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, and astaghfirullah. هو الذي بعث في الأميين رسولا منكم. It's in Surah Al-Jum'ah, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one who sent the unlettered prophet from among you, who yatlu alayhim ayatihi, who recites the ayat to you. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying he sent the prophet who is reciting the ayat to you, which is having an engagement with the Quran, right? That's that step. وَيُزَكِّيهِمْ. And then while you recite the Quran, you're hearing the message, and that is doing tazkiyah for you, right? That is cleansing you from your misconceptions or bringing you closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through the message of the Quran. وَيُعَلِّمُهُمُ الْكِتَابِ. And he's teaching you the book. So that's where we're going to now talk about how are we learning from that book and the wisdom, wal hikmah. Okay. So that's the third step. So the deeper study of the Quran. So now we're going to talk about that. The easiest thing to do is a set of these things. Let's say the ayat that I just read. Okay, you're curious. Go and read the context in the Quran of that ayah. Where is that ayah coming from? Which surah is it in? What are the ayat talking before that ayah? What are some of the ayat talking after that ayah? You understand? And that will help you understand the context of the ayah. What will that do? That will suddenly start to fill in pieces of the puzzle for you. Where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is talking about this particular message, why is that message important? In what context is it important? And you're then starting to then map out in your head some of the ayat you come across, where they are in the Quran and under what context they're being spoken about. Does that make sense? Okay, so for example, very famously, Ayatul Kursi, where is it at? Okay, but what's before it and what's after it? Right? Why is that ayah there? Right? I'm not asking you to answer. So these are the questions you should ask yourself. Why is it there? And what's before it and what's after it? Not because you want to understand the ayah better. Of course you want to understand the ayah better. But it is going to help you map out what is in the Quran. So anytime you hear an ayah that strikes you, read about it and read the ayat before it and after it. You don't have to read the whole surah, right? But just read the ayat before it and after it so you understand what that is. So, for example, dua of safar. If you knew that is in the Quran, right? Subhanalladhi sakhara lana hada wa ma kunna lahu muqrinin wa inna ila rabbina lamunqalibun, right? Where is that? What is before it? What is after it? Is it part of a story? What story is it part of? Right? So that's going to help you then connect with that ayah a little bit more, and you're going to feel the depth of that ayah. Why is it there to begin with, right? You'll slowly start to map out and expand from beyond the understanding of, oh, this ayah is in the Quran too. This ayah is in the Quran, in this surah, in this context. So suddenly you're starting to expand your map of your Quran in your head. Make sense? Is it a Makki? Is it a Madani? If it's Makki, under what context is speaking about? Like, for example, the other famous ayah in the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم إنك لعلى خلق عظيم. Okay, very simple. That what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is talking about the character, the high elevated character, excellent character of Rasulullah. That, oh Rasulullah, your character is azim. It is amazing. It is the best. Okay. Why is that being talked about? Why is that even an ayah? Right? Where is that at? What's the context? So you're gonna start to map it out. And sometimes you will get lucky. You find one of these ayat that are really famous, and you'll realize, oh, it's in a really short surah. Oh, great. Then this gives you an opportunity to actually read that surah and understand the context and dig a little bit deeper so you understand the emphasis, the importance of that ayah, and why is it famous to begin with, right? As an example. Does that make sense? Is it making sense? Do you think it's a good trick? Okay, good strategy. Shouldn't use the word trick, right? It's a strategy. Okay. Very similarly, there are very famous passages in the Quran. Often the Imam is going to recite, the Imams in Maghrib and Isha and Fajr, they're going to recite these common passages. You know, there's a few of them. Everybody recites them all the time. The short surahs, some passages in the Quran. For example, let's do one. Okay, let's do one. Bismillah. So we're very famous in Surah Al-Baqarah. There's a ayah that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, "Ba'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Fadhkuruni azkurkum." Have you heard this before? Fadhkuruni azkurkum washkuruli wala takfurun? No? Okay. Very famous. Okay. And also, if you're not familiar with them, when the Imam recited something, ask him, okay, what did you recite? That sounded really beautiful. Or maybe it didn't even mean anything to you, but ask him, why did you memorize this passage? Like Sheikh Samir, he often recites his favorite passages in the Quran and Isha. Ask him, you know, why did you memorize this passage that you just recited? So he'll tell you his story, right? And that's important for you to then understand, okay, why was it important to him? What is its meaning? What is its context? Maybe he can explain it to you. Then you go back and study a little bit more yourself, and you understand the meanings, right? So you kind of develop these maps. So let's go back to this passage. It's a very powerful passage. I'm not going to do a full tafsir of it, but we're going to do a quick review of it. Where did it go? Astaghfirullah. فَاذْكُرُونِي أَذْكُرْكُمْ وَاشْكُرُوا لِي وَلَا تَكْفُرُونَ. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, remember me and I will remember you. Do you know this part? Remember me and I will remember you. You know this one? That's this ayah. Okay, so another strategy. If you hear the English translation of a verse that you're familiar with, go back and see, okay, what is the Arabic? Ask somebody, what is the Arabic of that? Then you do a search, or you ask somebody, what is that ayah? I want to see what that is, right? Because it touched your heart. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, then remember me and I will remember you. Does Allah forget? Allah doesn't forget. What is it? What does Allah mean by I will remember you? So you ask somebody. So you develop this kind of a approach to map it out. Okay, so فَاذْكُرُونِي أَذْكُرُكُمْ وَاشْكُرُوا لِي وَلَا تَكْفُرُونَ, and do shukr of me and don't do kufr. It seems like unrelated things, shukr and kufr, being grateful and being a kafir. To the average mind, that might sound like, okay, they're two different things. You realize when you read the Quran, they're actually opposites of each other. Okay, so the total ultimate opposite of kufr is shukr, and that is a theme in the Quran. You'll realize, oh wait, what? This is a theme in the Quran. Like the ultimate opposite of kufr is shukr, and the ultimate opposite of shukr is kufr. How is that? Then you read all of the ayahs related to shukr, and you read all of the ayahs related to kufr, and then you kind of build your map. You expand your map, and you understand, oh, this is a theme in the Quran. And it is a very common theme in the Quran. This is why it's in this ayah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, remember me and I will remember you, and do shukr and not its opposite, which is kufr. So Quran uses a lot of opposing imagery. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, out of his mercy, again, this is not a tafsir class just yet, right? I'm just kind of giving you ideas. In his amazing mercy, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about the best of things and the worst of things. Where do most people lie? Where do we find most people? In the middle, right? That's the natural curve, right? So we get encouraged by the best of things, and obviously we get deterred from the worst of things, but it's not us, most of us. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala keep us closer to the best of things. You understand? So it is out of his mercy that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not talking about the middle people. Most of the time, probably almost 99.99% of the time, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is talking about the extremes, which is out of his mercy. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about the punishment for the worst of the people. Or like, you're like, okay, you get scared, but you're not, okay, I'm not that bad. Okay, which encourages you to move to the good side, right? And then you read the really good side. And then that is like, I'm not there yet. So let me work harder. You see, so this is what the Quran does. It talks about these extremes and tries to push you from the worst and pulls you to the good. So Quran is doing this again and again and again with these opposing themes. Okay, so once you understand that, you remember I talked about how Quran is so multidimensional. It's not just doesn't have the structure. There's a lot of hidden dimensions to the Quran and hidden structures. So this is just one of the themes. Okay, then we all read whenever somebody passes away. What do we read? Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. Verily, we belong to Allah, and to Him is our return. Where is this in the Quran? This is a Quranic ayah. Where is it? It's in this passage that we were just talking about. Remember me and I will remember you, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Ya ayyuhal ladina amanu ista'inu bis sabri was salah. O believers, seek help from patience and salah. Meaning, if you find yourself that you need help, what you should be doing, salah, and you should be showing patience on the calamity that struck you. Allah is inna Allaha ma'a sabirin. Everybody knows this. Inna Allaha ma'a sabirin. Okay, you take this phrase and you do a search in the Quran. Okay, where is this? Where's sabr being talked about? And then you'll find all of these topics on sabr, right? And that will help you build your map. Keep going. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about the martyrs, how they're not dead, they're alive. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about the shaheed, the shuhada, that they're not dead. وَلَا تَقُولُوا لِمَنْ يُقْتِلُ فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ أَمْوَاتٌ بَلْ أَحْيَاءٌ وَلَكِنْ لَا تَشْعُرُونَ. That you don't understand how they're alive, but just know that they're alive. I'm telling you. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَلَنَبْلُوَنَّكُمْ بِشَيْءٍ مِنَ الْخَوْفِ وَالْجُوعِ وَنَقْصٍ مِنَ الْأَمْوَالِ وَالْأَنفُسِ وَالثَّمَرَاتِ وَبَشِّرِ الصَّابِرِينَ. That Allah will test you by taking away your money, taking away your resources, taking away your wealth, and taking away your health, right? And those kinds of things. Allah will test you. But Allah says, give good news to those who show patience. And these are these are the people when calamity strikes them, when bad thing, when harm happens to them, what do they say? Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. That's the context of that. Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. You understand why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is talking about the attribute of believers, that when calamity strikes them, because of the importance of the patience and they're showing patience, they are the ones who say, if bad things are happening to me, well, I belong to Allah. Okay, what is the worst that can happen? I can die. And if I die in the state of Iman, what a beautiful thing. Inna ilayhi raji'un. I am going back to Allah. What could be more beautiful than that? You understand? So suddenly, so this is the power of just these sound bites that you hear, and when you understand which context they're speaking, those sound bites are, those ayat are, you suddenly understand the depth of the ayah, and then it helps you appreciate the Quran and brings you closer to the Quran, and it helps you develop this deeper connection. Then you might be so excited, oh, I want to memorize this passage and I'm going to read it in my salah. I'm going to recite it in Fajr. I'm going to recite it in Maghrib. I'm going to recite it in Isha. You understand? This is why Brother Samir, he memorizes passages in the Quran, because it attracts, these meanings attract them, and he wants to remind himself of those meanings. So what is that doing? It's helping you build a deeper connection with the Quran, right? It's in strategy. So what is, to simplify, ayat, passages that you hear, things in English you hear, Allah says such and such, go and look it up. Look, and maybe that will touch you by the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and then that'll help you connect with the Quran. And at the same time, it'll help map it out. I'm saying the same thing over and over. I think you guys get the idea. Okay. Also another very famous ayah. رَبَّنَا هَبْ لَنَا مِنْ أَزْوَاجِنَا وَذُرِّيَّاتِنَا قُرَّةَ أَعْيُنٍ وَاجْعَلْنَا لِلْمُتَّقِينَ إِمَامًا. Okay, where is this at? What does it even mean? Why is this a dua? Why are there du'as in the Quran? Du'as in the Quran is another strategy. You just do a search for what are some of the du'as in the Quran. Probably most of them you already know, and you had no idea of its meanings. Go look where those du'as are, which context they are, who said them. Are they said by a prophet, some past prophet? Are they said by Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam? Are they suggestions by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala himself, that these are the believers, when such and such happens, this is what they say? What is inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un? It's a suggestion from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Also, very famous, رَبَّنَا آتِنَا فِي الدُّنْيَا حَسَنَةً. Is this something Prophet said? No. It's a suggestion by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to say that. Where? After the discussion of Hajj. What? Wow, what's going on in that whole area of Surah Al-Baqarah, right? So again, it helps you develop this deeper connection. This is why a khatib, when they're on the minbar, they're able to talk about these kinds of things, because they know where they are, what the context is, and connect the dots and help you understand these themes, etc. Because they have this deeper connection with the Quran. It's because they understand, and you can get there too. And these are some of the strategies. So what are the strategies? Ayah, passages, du'as, also stories of the prophets. Find books on the stories of the prophets, read them, and those stories of the prophets most definitely start with the stories, with the ayat of the stories of the prophets in the Quran, because those are the anchors. And after them, they fill in the gaps with a hadith and some other sources. We can talk about that later. But at the end of the day, they take you back to the Quran. They'll tell you, okay, Nuh alayhi salam is spoken about in this ayah, in this surah, and this surah, this surah, this surah. Okay, great. That helps you create a map in your head. Then you realize, oh, almost the stories of the prophets are mostly concentrated in the Makki surahs. Then you realize that, oh, now I know how to recognize a Makki surah. If I see a story of the Prophet, then I know it's in the Makki surah. You understand what I'm trying to get at? It's helping you map out. The other thing it will also do, it will help you understand that the most spoken about prophet in the Quran is Musa alayhi salam. Why? His Musa alayhi salam story matches most closely with Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. Okay. There's a hijrah in there, is there not a hijrah? There's persecution in Egypt. And where do the children of Israel do? They do hijrah to Dar es Salaam, right? To the promised land. That's a hijrah. And what happens in the promised land? So it's a whole journey. He's giving the scripture, he's elevated to a station. Allah speaks to him directly. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala spoke to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam directly in Isra al-Mi'raj, right? In that story. And anyways, there's a lot of parallels with Musa. So you understand this. And once you understand this, you understand that wherever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran is going to talk about Musa alayhi salam, that is going to be directly associated, no joke, directly associated with something that is happening with Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam at the time of the revelation of that surah, or at the time of the revelation of that passage. So you're like, why is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talking about this part? Well, what's going on? Then it makes you more curious. Then you go back to the Sīrah, and then you understand the Sīrah, and then so it helps you bridge these connections, right? Is this all making sense? Okay. Am I telling you something you guys already know? No. Hopefully not, right? Okay. So, and then you want to build an even deeper connection, and you want to map out more of the Quran. You read about the description of Jannah in the Quran. It's in various places in the Quran, lots of places. You read about the description of Jahannam in the Quran, various places, right? Just as ideas, yeah? Ramadan is coming. You read about the ayah of Ramadan in the Quran. Okay, where is that at? Why? What are some of the lessons from it? What is that whole passage? You might be even encouraged to memorize that passage, and so on and so forth, etc., etc. I think it's only in Surah Al-Baqarah. Yes, it is. It's just one ayah. It's one ayah. Yes, just one ayah. One time Ramadan is mentioned. Also, there is a book out there, and please remind me, because I will definitely forget. There's a book out there that only shows you ayat that are specific to the Sīrah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Ayat in the Quran that are specific to the Sīrah. Well, most of the Quran is the Sīrah, but there's hidden, you don't know exactly when something happened, right? You don't know. It's not clear. Wherever it's clear, this author, Sheikh Fuad, he collected it. There's some Arabic books, but I've tried to find some English ones for you. It's called Understanding the Sīrah in the Context of the Quran. I have this book. I'll share it with you. Just remind me. And you just go through that book. Okay, this happened first, this happened first. Not only it will help you develop a relationship with Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, it in turn will help you develop the relationship with the Quran, because you see where those things are mentioned. Okay, what is the pre-Badr set of ayat? What are the post-Badr set of ayat? What is happening during Badr? Where is that? Where is the description of Uhud? Where is the description of when Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was being tortured, and how Allah, or depressed, and how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is lifting him up, etc., etc., etc. There's just so many examples, right? Okay. And then there are books that I want to recommend to you that you read. Those are basically books on tazkiyah, okay? So, and I'll talk about some of them right now. Quran also has, and we've briefly discussed this before, what are called amthal, parables, right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about parables. Like, for example, the ayat of Nur. We spoke about that before, right? How Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, مَثَلُ نُورِهِ Kabishkat. The example of his nur is like a lamp. Okay. Those parables, they are really, really deep in meaning. But there's a bunch of them in the Quran. Quran is full of similitudes. They're called similitude or parables or paragons. There's a amazing book that Ibn al-Qayyim wrote. It's Arabic, but it's translated in English. It's called The Paragons of the Quran, or Amthal al-Amthal fil Quran, by Ali ibn Qayyim. Okay, beautiful. It has, if I'm not wrong, about 40 or so parables. It's not an exhaustive book, but if you know where those parables are, again, it connects you to the Quran. Not only you understand the parable, but you understand the context. Always read the context. What's happening before? What's happening after? Why is that parable there? What is the message of the Quran around that parable? Why did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speak about that? For example, the two men that had the garden in Surah Al-Kahf. What is the purpose of it? Okay. How many stories are there in Surah Al-Kahf? Okay, that's an easy one. That's an easy strategy. How many stories? Did you know that Surah Al-Kahf is about stories? Yeah. Okay. How many stories? Five? Yeah. What are those stories? What is the significance of those stories? You look into it. It helps you develop this deeper connection. Okay, great. Then there's, remember I told you about Jannah and Jahannam? Yes. What was the reason? I just want to ask you. So these are all obviously opinions of Mufassirs, right? So the Quran is multidimensional. So anybody can come up with lots of reasons and they make sense. So for example, the reason, the story of the two men with the garden, Surah Al-Kahf is talking about muhlikat. What is a muhlikat? Things that are destructive to you. Okay? Things that are destructive to human, you yourself, or the society. The first story is what? The companions of the cave, as Ashabul Kahf. One of the elements of that story is Tawheed. It's not the only element, but it is one of the elements. It's Tawheed and sacrificing for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And it came before Hijrah. And it talks about the companions actually escaping from the city, fearing persecution, and taking refuge in the cave. Okay, so it has this dimension of what happened with the Muslims and when they emigrated from Mecca to Medina. Okay. So what is the destructive element? Not believing in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's story one. Story two is the companions of the gardens, right? It's wealth accumulation and getting lost in this dunya. Muhlika 2. Story 3 is about Musa and Khidr, right? Alayhi salam, alayhimus salam. What is the story there? What is a Muhlika 2? Knowledge. Little bit of knowledge, you think you know all that. Or questioning the qadr or the decree of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala decreed something, how dare you question the decree of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? You know nothing. You don't know the future. You don't have a crystal ball. That's story 3. I think there's just 4 stories. Which one is the 5th? Oh, no, but that's Dhul Qarnayn. That's along with Dhul Qarnayn. That's the 4th. What is the story of Dhul Qarnayn? Very complex dimensions, but one of the dimensions is that, remember I told you wealth? It's another wealth story, but it's not about wealth. It's about kingdom. It's about ownership and how he owned all this land. And instead of being ungrateful, he was super grateful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He was using his land and his kingdom to do good in the world, right? So Surah Al-Kahf is about muhlakat. It's about things that are destructive to one nature, and that's where you glean lessons from. And there's so many lessons, and I just gave you a hint of those. Okay, does that help? Okay, but how do you know that? How do you know that? Is because when you first you need to understand, okay, there are stories in Surah Al-Kahf. Okay, how many stories? Okay, what is story number one? What is the purpose? Then you're gonna go read books about, okay, the tafsir books about what is that story? What does this scholar say? What does this scholar say? It just, again, it deepens your relationship with the Quran. Okay, then so we talked about the amthal, the parables in the Quran. Then there are books, for example, and we've looked at them before, the description of Paradise and Hellfire by Imam Ashqar. We've looked at that before. I can quickly now show you. Actually, I want to show you all these books today, if that's okay. If we're hopefully we're not going too long. We're gonna end in 5-10 minutes, inshallah.
Is it possible to send those names on a link?
Yeah, of course.
I really appreciate it.
Yeah. So this is Paragons of the Quran, which the first one, which is the similitudes. I think it's gonna take a while to download. Astaghfirullah. Yes. It's debated. It's debated. Nobody knows for sure. The Quran is not explicit.
There's also no name of Hazrat Khidr.
Khidr, yeah. And whether he's a prophet or not.
No, but there was no name in that.
Yeah, Khidr means green because the story goes, it's not Quranic. It's not Quranic.
But there was nothing inside about Khidr. Like, just saying like.
No, his name isn't even there.
Yeah, his name is not even there.
No, its name is not there. Quran does not talk about names, just very few names. How many characters are there in, for example, Surah Yusuf? Lots of characters, right? There's all of the 11 other brothers. You don't even know the Yusuf alayhi salam's actual blood sibling, right, from the same mother. What's his name? Binyamin, right? You don't know. That name isn't even there. You don't know. You only know the father's name. You know the Yusuf alayhi salam's name, and that's it. In all of Surah Yusuf. However, how many characters are there? There's Yusuf, his 11 brothers, obviously his father, his mother. You don't know the name of the mother. You don't know the name of the other moms, the other wives of Yaqub alayhi salam. Then there's that the guy who picks Yusuf alayhi salam from the caravan, right? From the well, rather. Then he goes to that minister's home. You don't know the minister's name. You don't know the name of the wife of the minister. Okay. You don't know all of the women when they got invited. You don't know any of those people. You don't know the name of the qadi, of the judge. You in the prison, you don't know the name of the two prisoners that are asking questions. There's just so many characters, and you don't, zero name is mentioned, right? Other than Yusuf alayhi salam and Yaqub.
Yeah, I think the Khidr, the name, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, like, go to that person. So that means Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can give that work to anyone.
Oh, of course. And that is that. Yeah, so the other dimension of that is not, we talked about, it's humility. It's humility. Just because you're a prophet doesn't mean that you have all of the knowledge. The point Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is making with the story of Khidr is Allah gives knowledge to whom He wills. And to some, He gives this knowledge, and to others, He gives this knowledge. So if you, on your Quranic journey, in addition to listening to the Quran, like I suggested to you guys, start with this book. I'm showing you on the screen. I hope you can see Paragons of the Quran. You can get that online. There's PDFs available, and you can, if you like physical books, you can buy it. Excellent book to get started with. But don't just read the book, right? Read the context. Find that ayah in the Quran, where it's at and what's being discussed, okay? So there's lots of parables. Let's just act at random. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, مَثَلُ الَّذِينَ حُمِّلُوا التَّوْرَاةَ ثُمَّ لَمْ يَحْمِلُوهَا كَمَثَلِ الْحِمَارِ. That the example of those who were asked to carry the Torah, they did not really carry the Torah. Their example is like a donkey. So Ibn al-Qayyim will explain a little bit of it. He doesn't go into a lot of detail in this book. But then you go read other things. So start with this and you see, okay, which surah is this under? Oh, this Surah Jum'ah. What is the message of Surah Jum'ah? Oh, Surah Jum'ah is really short. It's a page and a half of a surah. It means it's memorizable. And if you connect with it, then you memorize it, then it builds a deeper relationship. Okay, so moving on. It's in Arabic or yeah. Al-Amthal al-Quran. Al-Amthal fil Quran li Ibn Qayyim. Okay. Then there's Paradise and Hell by Ashqar. Imam Ashqar has and we've spoken about this briefly before. He has a whole series on the Iman, right? He has these 7 or 8 books. Let me just show you. Just to remind you guys. So Belief in Allah book, then the World of Angels book, then the World of Jinn book, then the Signs of the Day of Judgment book, the minor signs, then the actual Day of Judgment, and Jannah and Jahannam. Okay, and then he has a whole book on Qadr. All of these books have tons of ayat from the Quran in them, tons of them. And these will be your anchors to go. And as you read the book, you read the ayah, it's like, where is this at? It's mentioned over here. Then you look at the context, and then it will help you map out the Quran. I'm saying the same thing over and over in different ways. Hopefully it's helping, inshallah. It's not repetitive. Okay, so that's, we will look at, for example, I told you the Jannah and Jahannam. Subhanallah. Okay, so we can look at the table of contents, which is my favorite thing to do, as you know, just to build the knowledge, the location of the hellfire, the extent of the hellfire, the level of the hellfire, the gates of the hellfire, the fuel of the hellfire, etc., etc., etc. The people of the hellfire, how they will be punished, and the vast number of people, and there are ayat and top of ayat on top of ayat in here. Let me just show you. Like, look at the ayat in here. You see that? Ayat. Lots of ayat. Lots of material for you to chew on. You can spend a whole year probably just researching just this on this book and building your knowledge. Okay. A lot of people don't know that. That's why I'm kind of sharing this with you guys. Okay. Then I'm gonna end soon. You guys are falling asleep. Let's see here. Going back to. Similarly, there's other books that I talked about. Then there's an amazing book by Ibn al-Qayyim called Ad-Da wa Dawa, The Disease and the Cure, by Ibn al-Qayyim. Also, excellent book, a very heart-wrenching book. You will understand all of the muhlikat that I just spoke about, right? The things that are destructive to you, and what do you do to actually combat the desires of this world or what have you, or bad habits that you have. Excellent book. It's called The Disease and the Cure. You can Google it, by Ibn al-Qayyim. It's an excellent book. Patience and Gratitude. So Ibn al-Qayyim was a very, he wrote a lot of books in Tazkiyah. He was amazing, brilliant guy. He was a student of Ibn Taymiyyah, okay, Ibn Qayyim. Patience and Gratitude. There's a lot of people who've written Patience and Gratitude. Tons of ayat in the Quran from there. Ibn Taymiyyah wrote The Diseases of the Heart and their Cure. Then there's the Stories of the Prophets by Ibn Kathir. So the Stories of the Prophets will collect all of the stories, and they start with the Quran. What does Quran say about Nuh alayhi salam? Where does it say about what? And then it fills in the gaps with the hadith. So that book, it's called The Stories of the Prophets by Ibn Kathir. World famous book on the stories of the prophets. The source for all stories is that book. Okay, the English one is a abridged version. It's a briefer version of the Arabic, but that's good enough for you to start reading. And there's another book by, remember the Abdul Halim I told you, he's the best translation of the English Quran is Abdul Halim. He has a book that he wrote called Understanding the Quran. And he talks about the different themes in the Quran. It's a great book. Like his chapter 1 is water in the Quran. You're like, what? Why is that an important chapter? Well, read it. And then you'll understand what he means by that being a very important theme in the Quran. And that'll help you connect with the Quran. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks about water, what does he mean? Okay. Um, and so on and so forth. So hopefully this was a good strategy for you to build a deeper connection. The last thing I will say is I'm gonna skip this portion. One, so some people say, okay, I just want to read the translation. I'm not a fan of translations. Why? Because it's just one person's interpretation of the Quran. It's just one person's. Quran is so deep, you can't translate an ayah in one line. You can't do that. It loses
90%.
yeah 90% of its meaning. Okay, we're exaggerating and not really exaggerating at the same time. Some ayat, yes, you can do that. Some ayat you don't. Some ayat you can write books on. Okay, so my recommendation is tafsir. The problem with tafsir is it's not in English. Most of it is in Arabic. However, there's one excellent tafsir that I want each one of you to be your go-to. So remember, you're listening to the audio of the Quran, the translation of Abdul Halim on a daily basis. Okay, keep doing that. However, when you want to do a deeper study, for a particular ayah, for a particular passage, start with the starter tafsir called Tafsir Sadi. I've talked about Tafsir Sadi before. It's in English. It's about 10 volumes. It's excellent. What it does, it's summarizes. It's a summary of the really larger tafsir that are very, very well-known tafsir. Not only does he summarize them in a very nice way, through reading the Tafsir al-Sa'di, you will learn the depth of the stories of the prophets. You will learn about the Sīrah, when the Quran references an incident in the Sīrah happening. Imam Sa'di, he's going to give you the context of what's going on around that time. And why is that happening? And why is this ayah relevant? Excellent resource, so easy to read. It is so easy to read that it's a must-have, in my opinion, by all English-speaking Muslims. Okay, Tafsir al-Sa'di. Let me show you. There's 10 volumes. Here's just one example. He starts with, okay, Surah al-Ma'arij. سأل سائل بعذاب واقع. Okay, a skeptic has asked to hasten the punishment. Our khutbah topic, where mushrikun of Makkah, they were asking Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, if you think the day of judgment is true, then let it come. Okay, when is it going to come? Let it come now. So that's that. This is one of the Surah Ma'arij. Okay. And there's this beautiful tafsir. It is so easy to read, not complicated. It's not embedded with different references or different ahadith. It just removes, filters out all of that, what I would say, detail, okay, which can be very, very overwhelming for beginners to have a lot of detail, and it just summarizes it for you and helps you explain. Look at it. Then Allah mentions the distance covered by the angels and the souls, and they ascend to him, and tells us that they ascend in a day. It's very simple English. Very simple English. It's an excellent resource. Okay. Okay. So this is usually my go-to for a very quick snapshot of a surah or an ayah or a passage. Just very quick summary. Like, it just helps me reminded, like bullet points, right? They become bullet points in my head. Okay, yes, that's that. These are the things that we need to talk about, for example. So excellent resource. And then hopefully you guys, there's so much to talk about, but I don't want to take up too much of your time. I'll share some of this toolkit, but I spoke about the dangers of the translation. So there's another dangerous part of translations. What is the danger part of translation? Since it's one guy's interpretation, you don't know if you're reading the translation from a Shia Muslim, because they might translate an ayah a little bit differently, even though it's the same Quran, because you might end up misunderstanding it, or from an Ahmadiyya, They have translations out there too. How would you know the difference, right? So that's why translations are kind of dangerous. So that's one danger. The other danger is, and hopefully, inshallah, this is the last thing that I will say, and we will end here. The other danger is all of these different sects. For example, I'm just going to pick on the Shia sect, okay? With all due respect, you don't know about their belief system necessarily, so you wouldn't be able to relate to everything that I'll say, but I'll quickly tell you. Sunnis are more about, so two key differences. So difference number one, Sunnis are more about the clear understanding of the Quran, the clear apparent understanding of the Quran. For us, that is the primary meaning of the Quran, not the deeper meaning necessarily, because the deeper meaning is just somebody's opinion. Understand? Clear? Shias, one of their huge, big differences is they believe in dualism. There is a zahir and there's a batin. There's a apparent meaning and there is a hidden meaning. For them, both are equally important. To Sunnis, the zahir is more important and the batin is less important and lower priority. Okay. I cannot give you a fatwa based on a hidden meaning in Sunnism. You understand? I cannot, because that's just a hidden meaning that has no clear evidence, that may not have any clear evidence. To Shias, they will give you a fatwa based on the hidden meaning. And who has the authority of the hidden meaning? The Imams. Okay? Because they believe that the Imams exist, and this is the difference number two. For them, it is important that after prophets, there are leaders, imams, that have a continuous chain, that are always there, that are responsible, and they have the authority to interpret the deen. Okay? So whatever the imam says goes. Okay? For the majority of the Shia are called the Ithna Ashari, the 12-verse Shia. Okay, we will talk about this in our Aqidah class, inshallah, when Allah gives us life and we get an opportunity to talk about Aqidah a little bit deeper. But to them, the 12th Imam was the left hidden Imam, and he will come, he will be the Mahdi. However, Ismailis, you know Ismailis?
Yes.
Okay. Ahmadiyya are not Shia. Okay, they're completely different. Okay, just so you know, I wanted to just remove that confusion. The Ismailis, with all due respect, their belief is there is a continuous chain of Imam. The first Imam was Ali radiallahu anh, and it continues to this day. And you know the Agha Khan, the last Agha Khan is the last Imam. I forget his full name. That Imam, for them, the belief is important. And whatever the Imam says goes. So if he changes the meaning, if they say, don't pray this way, pray this way, they will do it because that's their aqidah. The Imam has the authority to derive fiqh, and he's responsible for the batin. He's responsible to explain to you the hidden meaning of the Quran. Okay. And the hidden meaning of the Sunnah, or interpret the Sunnah. So they believe that. That's why their religion has changed, because the Imams have changed the religion so much. So it's so different from Sunnis, for example.
Just like the Jewish Kahanut.
Sure. Very similar. The rabbis, yeah? But anyway.
No, the Kahanut, above the rabbi.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know about that.
The Kahanut, that's the biggest rabbi of all. You know?
Yeah. So, but what the point I was trying to make is this belief in the batin and the two key pillars that I talked about just now in Shiism, the belief in the hidden and the belief in the that an imam must exist. Is this in the Quran? According to them, it is. Remember, I was talking about dangers of translation? So they read in, and maybe I will do this next time. Well, not maybe next time, or during the course of the Quranic sciences. Bring you the evidences of the Shia that how they read in the meanings of their beliefs in the Quran. Ahmadiyya do the same thing. So what are they focusing on? The hidden interpretive meanings, not the clear apparent meanings, but the hidden interpreted meaning that can be twisted and turned to who. Basically, if you create a cult of yours and you want to back that up with the Quran, you can do that, because you just twist the meaning and you read in things that didn't even exist, make zero sense, but you still read it in. Yes, completely take it out of context. Sufism is not a sect. Yeah, we'll talk about that, inshallah. There's nothing wrong with that Sufism. It's misunderstood, and it's a very recent thing. It's misunderstood. Sufism, until 100, 200 years ago, everybody was proud. All Muslims in the world were proud to wear the Sufi badge and belong to this tariqah and this tariqah and this. This is a very recent thing that, anyway, we'll talk about that later. Okay. Questions? Was this helpful?
Yes.
Okay, inshallah.
So you're gonna send all the books in the website?
Yes. Yes. Yeah, you can have all my library, but I'll go ahead and send you these books to start with, and Tafsir Sadi. Okay. Very important. Sunni Tafsir, which helps you give context, and then you will not be left to your brain to oh, it has this deep meaning, or I read this in the Quran and it says this such and such. You're not gonna go in a astray, you're not gonna go in a crazy direction, right? You're gonna stay focused with the majority, with the mainstream understanding of how to understand the ayah. Yes.
Is that like basically summary?
Tafsir Sadi? No, it's not summaries of each surah. It goes ayah by ayah by ayah. It's detailed, but it is in a very simple English that you will be able to understand, inshallah ta'ala. Any other questions? Okay, all right, so I'll send you these books. Wa akhiru da'wana alhamdulillah rabbil alamin.